In the summer of 1984, I decided to go camping alone in the Sawtooth National Recreation Area of Idaho. I was seeking some solitude and an escape from my hectic life. The second night I was there, while nestled in my tent, I heard the sounds of the forest quiet down, replaced only by the eerie stillness of the wind in the trees. It made my skin crawl. I laid there in the darkness, when suddenly a pungent smell wafted into my tent. Something foul and decaying, like rotten eggs mixed with a wet dog. My heart raced as I sat up, peering into the darkness beyond the fabric of my shelter. That's when I heard it. A deep, resonant barking sound, like it was vibrating the ground. Before I could react or do anything, I felt a heavy weight pressing against the tent. The fabric bulged inward, and I could make out the impression of a large clawed hand pressing against the side. I could see the shadow of a face illuminated briefly by my flashlight as I shifted closer. Its eyes glowed like embers of a dying fire. Panic surged through me, and I instinctively shouted, "Get away!" But all I could do was begin to sob as the creature let out a low grunt and retreated, leaving me trembling in fear. I didn't sleep that night, too terrified to move, and at first light, I tore down my camp and fled, convinced I had encountered something not of this world. In the fall of 1992, my family owned a small farm outside of Bend, Oregon. Life was simple, and we often heard stories from locals about strange happenings in the woods nearby, but I never believed any of them. Until that autumn. It started with our livestock. Our chickens would go missing and reappear in bizarre places, and I noticed our cows seemed more on edge, spooked. It's almost as if I could see the fear in their wide eyes. Then one night, I was awoken by a loud ruckus outside. Peering through my bedroom window, I saw something large darting between the trees, an enormous shadowy figure with long limbs. This happened for several nights in a row, and we thought it was just a bear at first. But as the weeks passed, the creature began playing tricks on us. It would sometimes throw rocks at the house, rattle the barn doors, and mimic the sounds of our animals, as if it was trying to draw us out of the house. But when we would go check on it, it would vanish into the woods whenever we got close. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed and about to lay down, I heard this loud, echoing howl coming from outside near the woods. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up and covered me with goosebumps. I decided I better go out and check to make sure everything was okay. I grabbed a flashlight and began working my way towards the woods, going along the side of the barn. Suddenly I felt a rush of wind, and as I turned around, I saw a silhouette of a large creature looming over me. I could see its eyes, dark, deep set, with a tinge of intelligence. Just then, it let out a guttural noise, sending me falling backwards in terror. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted to the house for safety. From that point forward, I rarely left the house at night unless it was absolutely necessary. We left the farm soon after, but I'll never forget the presence of something lurking just beyond the trees, and the feeling of that thing towering over me. I still can't wrap my mind around what it really was, and it bothers me. Probably always will. It was the summer of 1965 when I took a road trip through the redwoods of California with some of my friends. We were young, wild, and ready for adventure. One night we decided to drive along a narrow, winding road that cut through the heart of the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the stars. As we cruised along, we noticed the air became eerily still, and the sounds of the forest seemed to vanish. the trees casting monstrous shadows against the headlights. Suddenly, out of nowhere, something huge darted across the road, forcing us to slam on the brakes. I remember one of my friends yelling, "What was that?" I gasped. My heart began racing. In the quick moment that it darted in front of the headlights, I saw a flash of brown fur and something massive, at least 7 to 9 feet tall. Before we could process what had happened, the car shook violently as something enormous slammed against the side. We all screamed as we looked out the windows and saw it, an immense creature covered in dark brown fur, towering over the car. It was rocking the car back and forth with little effort. It stared at us with its piercing dark eyes, almost as if it was sizing us up. We were all frozen in terror for a moment, and finally I put the car back in drive and took off down the road. My friends yelled from the back seat, "It's chasing us!" I looked in the rearview mirror and could see the shadowy figure keeping pace with the car, but eventually either we got enough speed or it decided to leave us alone. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town. We got out of the car, shaking and disturbed. We told our story to the people at the gas station we stopped at, but all they did was chuckle, dismissing our encounter as some wild story. But I know what we saw, and I'll never forget that night when the creature of the woods attacked my car. I'll never forget the summer of 1978 when I decided to go camping alone in Olympic National Park. The trees were like towering sentinels watching over me, and the serene sounds of nature lulled me into a false sense of peace. One evening, while I sat by my campfire, I heard the snap and the crackle of branches nearby. I froze, squinting into the thickening shadows of the forest. At first, I thought it was a deer, but then I saw it. A massive, at least 8 foot tall figure, covered in dark, matted hair, standing just beyond the trees. It had a human-like shape. I'm positive it wasn't a bear. My heart raced as the figure tilted its head, almost as if it was studying me, trying to figure out what I was. I was terrified, but too mesmerized to move. After what felt like an eternity, it let out a low growl that sent chills down my spine, and I stumbled backwards, tripping over my own feet. I scrambled into my tent, my heart pounding in my ears, too frightened to sleep that night. The next morning, I found my food supplies had been ransacked, but no trace of the creature remained. To this day, I wonder what I really saw in those woods. In the fall of 1996, I joined a group of friends for a bear hunting trip in the remote forests of Montana. The air was crisp, and the thrill of the hunt filled our spirits. We set out early one morning, armed and ready for adventure. After several hours in the field, I spotted a massive creature lurking among the trees, a towering figure with thick, matted hair. I aimed my rifle and squeezed the trigger. The bullet found its mark, and the creature let out a blood-curdling roar that echoed through the woods. It turned, its eyes filled with rage. It had a face like a bulldog, long arms, and was covered in thick, knotted dark hair. It raised up on 2 tall legs. It was about 8 to 8.5 feet tall, and charged straight for me. This was no bear. I cursed and clenched my gun and ran, the sounds of branches snapping and the ground thundering with each step as it chased me. I darted through the underbrush. I could smell a horrible stench, a mix of wet earth and something putrid, as the creature pursued me with terrifying speed. I finally stumbled into a clearing, heart racing, and glanced back to see the creature stop, towering at the tree line. It let out a horrifying gurgle, like it was trying to speak or express something. This sent waves of panic through me. As I turned to escape, I could feel its eyes glaring at me. I just kept praying it wouldn't start following me again. I made it back to camp, and I was left with the chilling realization that not only had I seen Bigfoot, but I had provoked it. We left the woods immediately after I told everyone what I saw. They seemed hesitant to believe me, but could tell I was obviously scared and freaking out. I haven't gone hunting since.